When two popular streamers slash chess grandmasters Sketch and Jynxzi finally played a game, they created an absolute masterpiece on the chessboard. The game is so complex that if you tried to load it into any chess website, it simply wouldn't work. And that's because they set up the board sideways. As you can see, this square is supposed to be a dark square. Also, to level the rating playing field, Jynxzi has his king and queen on the wrong squares. Sketch with the white pieces starts off with a4, edging up the board. Jynxzi controls the center with d5 and Sketch develops his knight, attacking this directly and also inviting Jynxzi to push the pawn, which he does not. Instead, he protects the pawn, and now Sketch brings out his other knight, claiming more squares in the center. Nonetheless, Jynxzi strikes with b5, an intricate move attacking this way, and poses the powerful question to Sketch: how are you going to defend this pawn? But Sketch simply does not. Instead, he brings out his knight to g5. Jynxzi halts all plans of attacking on the queen side and instead attacks the knight with c6. Very interesting move. But here Sketch plays the first brilliancy of the game, knight to e6 with check. Jynxzi takes a moment to think about the position and realizes he can just take this knight for free. What's the disadvantage of this position? Well, now this pawn can't come forward, and this is going to hinder Black's development. But before taking advantage of that, first Sketch protects his queen side. Either way, Jynxzi initiates a trade. Sketch takes back, and now knight comes out to a6, counter-edging Sketch. But now g3, preparing to fianchetto this bishop along the dark squares and control this really powerful diagonal. And here, Jynxzi castles. Sketch follows up by striking in the center, but Jynxzi says okay, bring it on, and attacks the newly developed pawn directly. But here, Sketch finds the very tricky bishop to f4 with check, but Jynxzi doesn't feel the need to respond to said check, and he instead takes this pawn, attacking the knight and allowing his king to stay in check. But Sketch has a plethora of choices. He can save his knight, give a check with the queen, give a check with the rook, but with the power of 1,000 ChatGPTs, he finds the very tricky bishop takes king. This is what happens when super grandmasters think too deeply into a position. These boys then took a moment to return to this dimension and adjusted the board to the way it was. Well, this is actually how they set it up, which, as you can see, is slightly incorrect. This pawn was actually back here, but they don't seem to mind. Sketch here plays bishop to f4 with check. By the way, I had to build this website from scratch just to show you guys the game. Check out crashchess.com if you want to give it a go, or get yourself a little premium to support me. And Jynxzi takes this opportunity to save his king. And now things get truly spicy. But how does one take advantage of this? Well, the knight comes in first, saving the knight from this threat, but also attacking this pawn. Will Jynxzi see it? No, unfortunately he does not. He instead develops his rook. Very interesting square, attacking this knight, perhaps preparing to trade off this way. Here, Sketch finds the absolutely brilliant knight takes d4. Yes, his own bishop is hanging, but he takes this opportunity to attack Sketch's bishop with bishop to g5. Now the knight takes the free bishop, and again, Jynxzi does not capitalize because he realizes his rook is hanging. Instead, he saves his rook. Bishop drops back to d2, and now rook takes the knight. I think at this point, Sketch felt some fear because his king is being eyed up by this rook, so he puts another piece in front of the king, very intelligent stuff, and blocks in his own pawn from developing. Jynxzi wastes no time and blunders another pawn, but Sketch doesn't bother with it. Instead, he plays bishop to h3, preparing to blunder his own bishop, but Jynxzi once again does not care about this or this. Instead, he just develops his knight. Very principled stuff. Always want to develop your pieces at every opportunity you can. And now Sketch takes the free pawn. Pawn comes to h6 and bishop drops back. Now the knight jumps into the center of the board to e4. Sketch takes this opportunity to take the free pawn, and now the rook slides across. But here he's created a threat which is going to be almost impossible to stop. Rook is attacking this way, and he's attacking the bishop, and the knight is covering this f2 square. How will Sketch get out of this tricky situation? Well, he just eliminates the knight, and now there is no longer a threat here. Jynxzi takes back, and the bishop develops to a5, perhaps preparing something like queen to d8 to give a check and potentially even an eventual checkmate. Here, the bishop drops over to g7, and this eyes up this rook. Now the bishop drops back to close the eye of the bishop and also attack this rook directly. But Jynxzi blocks with the pawn, so everything is totally fine now, right? Not so fast. Sketch now takes, winning the pawn in exchange for a bishop. Perhaps the idea of this was to nullify the abilities of this bishop, because as you can see, there's two pieces blocking it. Where is it gonna go? Now Sketch plays the most masterful bait I have ever seen and pushes his pawn to c3, baiting Jynxzi into taking the pawn with the queen, which he absolutely does, and now the king is in check. If the queen blocks, he loses the rook, so the king is forced to move back. And if you look at the position, the queen is a little bit vulnerable. There are some problems coming, but Jynxzi foresees this and brings his queen back to c8, preparing perhaps to give a check along this diagonal. The rook comes across, and now Jynxzi blocks with his own rook. The rooks get traded off, and now there is a threat of pushing the pawn forward and winning the rook. But Sketch doesn't see it as a threat. Instead, he edges a little bit up the board. But then, Jynxzi finds the incredible pawn to e3, opening up this diagonal with the threat that we mentioned earlier. The only winning move here for Sketch is to push this pawn, block in all of this nonsense, and save the day. But Sketch has bigger plans. Instead, he takes the pawn, and Jynxzi finds the beautiful queen takes h1. With check, forcing the king to its only legal square, and Jynxzi picks up the queen. But it's not over yet. Because yes, Sketch only has pawns and his king left, so it's only a matter of time before Jynxzi starts putting him in check and delivering checkmate. So he does the absolutely unthinkable and puts himself in check. But I think Jynxzi knew what was coming, so he doesn't take the bait. Instead, he takes the free pawn and prepares his rook to f8. The boys take a moment to deliberate the game, and Sketch is completely dumbfounded. So Jynxzi does the honorable thing and resigns the game for Sketch.
All right, we just end it here, right?
Resign now.
Resign. That was the coolest thing I've ever done, hands down.
Giving the victory to Jynxzi. I hope this video changes your life.